Picture this. A man in a crisp navy suit stands tall, despite the weight of rejection pressing down on his shoulders. Mike Callahan, Marine Corps veteran with 2 tours in Afghanistan, watches as the bank manager slides his loan application back across the polished mahogany desk. The fluorescent lights above cast harsh shadows across the manager's face, highlighting his dismissive expression. "I'm sorry, Mr. Callahan, but your application just doesn't meet our current criteria. Perhaps try again in 6 months when you've built more credit history." Mike's calloused hands, evidence of both military service and the construction work he's done since, clenched slightly around the folder containing his meticulously prepared business plan, the plan he'd spent countless nights perfecting after his day job, the plan that would finally let him open his own construction company focusing on accessible home modifications for disabled veterans. "With respect, sir, my credit score is excellent. I have savings, collateral, and experience. Your own loan officer said my application was solid. What's the real issue here?" The manager leans back, fingers forming a steeple under his chin. "The bank simply doesn't see sufficient evidence that your specific business model would be viable in this market. It's nothing personal." But it was personal. Mike could feel it in the way the manager's eyes never quite met his, in the way his military experience was glossed over as if 6 years of leadership and logistics management meant nothing, in the way his detailed market research was dismissed without proper review. "Thank you for your time," Mike says, gathering his papers with military precision. As he stands to leave, the manager offers a condescending smile. "Best of luck with your endeavor. Perhaps try one of those online lenders? I hear they're less particular about their investments." Mike's jaw tightens, but he says nothing as he walks out through the cavernous lobby, past the marble columns and promotional posters advertising small business loans with smiling, successful entrepreneurs. Little did he know that this rejection, his 4th from different banks in town, would become the catalyst for something extraordinary that would transform not just his life, but the entire community's understanding of what it means to support their veterans. Let me take you back to where it all began. Mike Callahan had always been methodical and disciplined. Growing up in the blue-collar neighborhood of Riverdale, he learned the value of hard work from his father, a carpenter who built half the porches in town with nothing but honest labor and a reputation for excellence. When Mike joined the Marines at 19, he carried those values with him through boot camp and into combat. During his 6 years of service, Mike discovered a talent for logistics and problem-solving. He could look at a challenging situation and see not just obstacles, but pathways. This skill served him well when he returned home with a Purple Heart and a determination to build something meaningful. He didn't talk much about the ambush that had left him with a titanium rod in his leg and 2 of his squad mates in flag-draped coffins. Instead, he channeled that experience into a vision. While recovering in the VA hospital, he had noticed how many returning veterans struggled with homes that weren't adapted to their new physical realities. Simple things: doorways too narrow for wheelchairs, showers impossible to navigate with, prosthetics, kitchens that couldn't be used from a seated position. For 3 years after his discharge, Mike worked for Precision Builders, learning the ins and outs of residential construction and specializing in accessibility modifications. His boss, Frank, appreciated Mike's attention to detail and his ability to communicate with clients who were often going through difficult adjustments. "You've got a gift, son," Frank told him one evening as they finished installing a wheelchair ramp for a retired Army sergeant. "These vets trust you because you speak their language. You understand what they're not saying." Mike had saved every possible penny, living in a modest 1-bedroom apartment and driving a second-hand truck. He had created detailed business plans, conducted market research, and even secured letters of intent from several potential clients, fellow veterans who needed work done but wanted to wait for Mike to strike out on his own. His preparation was evident in the 3-inch binder he brought to every bank meeting. Inside were impeccable financial projections, marketing strategies, and testimonials from clients he'd helped through Precision. There was even a letter from Congressman Davis praising Mike's volunteer work renovating the local VFW hall. The spring morning when Mike first walked into Riverdale First National Bank had been full of promise. Cherry blossoms dotted the trees, lining Main Street, and the smell of fresh coffee wafted from Maggie's diner where he'd treated himself to breakfast to calm his nerves. He remembered straightening his tie, the one his mother had given him for his military graduation, before pushing through the heavy glass doors. The bank's interior was impressive, with polished marble floors and dark wood accents that spoke of stability and tradition. The American flag stood proudly next to the bank's logo, and posters advertised special mortgage rates for first-time homebuyers and small business loans to build our community together. Mike had approached the receptionist with confidence, his posture straight as the flagpole outside. "I have an appointment with Mr. Harrington about a small business loan." What Mike didn't notice then was Richard Harrington watching him from the second-floor balcony that overlooked the lobby. Harrington's eyes narrowed slightly as he observed the military precision in Mike's walk, despite the barely perceptible limp. He noted the haircut, the respectful nod to the security guard, the worn edges of the binder clutched perhaps too tightly in Mike's left hand. "Another one of those veteran charity cases," Harrington murmured to himself before turning back toward his office, already formulating the gentle letdown he'd deliver after making the man wait just long enough to understand his place in the hierarchy of Riverdale First National's priorities. Mike's first meeting with Richard Harrington had started pleasantly enough. The loan officer's office was smaller than expected, but decorated with an impressive array of certificates and awards. A Yale diploma hung prominently behind his desk. "So, Mr. Callahan," Harrington began, not looking up from the application as Mike settled into the chair across from him, "you want to start a construction company?" "Yes, sir, but with a specific focus on accessibility modifications for disabled veterans and seniors. There's a significant need in our community that isn't being adequately addressed." Harrington nodded absently. "And you have construction experience?" 3 years with Precision Builders, plus extensive training in the Marines where I supervised infrastructure projects on base and during deployment. I've included recommendation letters from— Yes, I see that." Harrington cut him off, flipping past the letters without reading them. "The thing is, Mr. Callahan, construction is a competitive field, very high failure rate for new businesses, particularly in economic climates like ours." Mike leaned forward. "That's why I've focused on this specific niche. There are over 3,000 veterans within 30 miles of Riverdale, and based on national statistics, approximately 600 of them have service-connected disabilities that might require home modifications. That's not even counting the aging population who— The bank is concerned with numbers, Mr. Callahan. Hard data, previous small business success." Harrington's tone was professionally dismissive. "Your military service is admirable, of course. Thank you for that. But this is business." The words fell like small, calculated blows. The distinction Harrington drew between service and business. The way he said, "admirable," with a hint of condescension. The dismissal of Mike's research as though sentiments, rather than statistics, drove his business model. "The numbers are all here, sir," Mike said, his voice steady as he opened his binder to the financial projections. "I've secured commitments from 15 clients already, contingent on my business opening. My startup costs are modest because I already own most of the necessary tools, and I've arranged favorable terms with suppliers." Harrington glanced at the pages without really seeing them. "We'll review your application thoroughly, Mr. Callahan, but I should warn you that our approval rates have been selective recently. Perhaps you might consider one of those special veteran programs. There are grants for people in your situation." Mike's jaw tightened at the implication that he was looking for a handout rather than a business partnership. "I'm not applying for charity, Mr. Harrington. I'm offering your bank the opportunity to invest in a solid business that will generate positive returns while serving an underrepresented community." As he stood to leave, Harrington offered a thin smile. "Noble sentiments. We'll be in touch within 10 business days." The rejection letter came in 7. Over the following weeks, the pattern repeated itself at Riverdale Credit Union, First Capital Bank, and finally, Prairie Trust. Each rejection more demoralizing than the last. Each time, Mike refined his presentation, adjusted his projections, and gathered more supporting evidence. And each time he encountered the same wall of polite dismissal. The fourth rejection, the one we witnessed at the beginning, hit particularly hard because Prairie Trust had specifically advertised a new initiative supporting veteran entrepreneurs. The disconnect between their marketing and their actions crystallized something in Mike's understanding of how the system viewed veterans like him. That evening, as Mike sat at his kitchen table surrounded by rejection letters, his phone rang. It was Teresa Garcia, the local reporter who ran the Riverdale Gazette's business section. "Mike, I hope I'm not calling too late. Listen, I heard about what happened at Prairie Trust today." Mike rubbed his eyes. "News travels fast." "Small town," Teresa replied. "My cousin works as a teller there. Said you had quite the business plan but got shut down anyway. I'm working on a piece about lending practices and whether they're serving the community. Would you be willing to talk about your experience?" Mike hesitated. He'd been raised not to complain or air private matters publicly. Military service had reinforced that stoicism. But something about the systematic rejection he'd faced felt bigger than his personal disappointment. "Yes," he finally said. "I think that's a conversation worth having." Teresa's article appeared 3 days later on the front page of the Gazette. Local hero, denied. Are Riverdale banks failing our veterans? The piece meticulously documented Mike's qualifications, his business plan's strengths, and the seemingly arbitrary rejections he'd received. It included quotes from Frank at Precision, builders vouching for Mike's exceptional skills and work ethic. Most damning were the statistics Teresa had uncovered showing that despite their public support for veteran causes, local banks had approved fewer than 8% of veteran business loans in the past 5 years, compared to a 22% approval rate for non-veteran applicants with similar qualifications. The article struck a nerve in Riverdale. By noon, the Gazette's website had crashed from traffic. The comment section overflowed with residents expressing outrage and sharing similar stories. Local radio picked up the story, with callers flooding the lines during the afternoon talk show. Mike's phone began ringing constantly. Fellow veterans, former clients, neighbors he barely knew, all expressing support and asking how they could help. Then came a call from an unexpected source. "Mr. Callahan, this is Sarah Matthews from First Capital. I'm calling to discuss your loan application." Mike's grip tightened on his phone. "I received your rejection letter 2 weeks ago, Ms. Matthews." "Yes, well," she cleared her throat uncomfortably. "In light of new information, we'd like to reconsider your application. Perhaps you could come in tomorrow morning, say 9 o'clock? Similar calls followed from the other banks. Suddenly, the same institutions that couldn't be bothered to thoroughly review his business plan were eager to meet. Their tones now deferential, apologetic. Mike recognized the damage control for what it was. But it was a call from Diane Reynolds, his former platoon leader's wife, that truly changed everything. "Mike, have you checked your email? Or the Facebook group?" "Been a little busy fielding calls from suddenly helpful bankers," he replied. "Well, drop everything and look. Now." Mike opened his laptop to find hundreds of notifications. At Diane's suggestion, he navigated to the Riverdale Neighbors Facebook group, and his breath caught. Someone, he later learned it was Diane herself, had created a post about his situation and proposed an alternative: community funding, a homegrown loan from the people of Riverdale to help launch Callahan Accessible Construction. The post had gone viral within the local community. Already, over 200 people had pledged contributions ranging from $50 to $5,000. The total was approaching $60,000, nearly the amount he'd been seeking from the banks. But it wasn't just money being offered. Local businesses were pledging services: free accounting for a year from Wilson Tax Services, discounted building supplies from Riverdale Hardware, marketing help from a graphic designer who'd gone to high school with Mike. Fellow veterans offered to work on projects once the business launched, creating an instant workforce. Comments poured in. "My father couldn't navigate our home after his stroke. We need this service in Riverdale. Mike helped build the ramp at my church. Finest craftsman I've ever seen. This man deserves our support. If the banks won't invest in our veterans, we will. Just put my stimulus check to better use than I ever could." Tears blurred Mike's vision as he scrolled through page after page of support. This wasn't charity. It was community investment in a needed service, recognition of his skills and the value he offered. It was Riverdale collectively saying, "We see you. We believe in you. We need what you're building." The next morning, Mike canceled all his bank appointments with a single email. "Thank you for your renewed interest. However, I've secured funding through a community investment initiative that better aligns with my business values. I look forward to serving Riverdale through Callahan Accessible Construction." Within 3 weeks, the community funding reached $85,000, more than Mike had originally sought from the banks. A local attorney helped him structure it as formal loans and investments with proper documentation and reasonable interest rates that would benefit both the community investors and allow his business to thrive. The real estate agent who'd sold Mike his apartment connected him with a property owner willing to lease a small warehouse space on favorable terms. Veterans from 3 counties volunteered for a weekend work party to renovate the space into a functional office and workshop. As word spread, Mike received calls from disabled veterans as far as 50 miles away inquiring about services. The VA hospital's occupational therapy department reached out about a potential partnership. Congressman Davis, who had written one of Mike's recommendation letters, invited him to participate in a panel discussion on veteran entrepreneurship. 6 weeks after that final bank rejection, Callahan Accessible Construction held its grand opening. The warehouse parking lot overflowed with supporters. The mayor cut a ribbon. Frank from Precision Builders presented Mike with a custom toolbox engraved with his new company logo. Teresa from the Gazette covered the event with a front-page spread. Richard Harrington from Riverdale First National watched the coverage from his office, a troubled expression on his face as he calculated the reputational damage and lost opportunity his bank had suffered. The next day, Prairie Trust announced a new, improved veteran business loan program with guaranteed review by senior management. The other banks quickly followed suit, but perhaps the most meaningful moment came when Earl Simmons, an 82-year-old Korean War veteran who'd been struggling with mobility in his beloved Craftsman home, became Mike's first official client. "Son," Earl said, leaning on his walker as they reviewed plans for widening doorways and installing a wheelchair-accessible shower, "I've been waiting for someone who understands for a long time. Not just the building part. Anybody can cut wood and hang drywall. But someone who gets what it means to fight for your country, and then fight to live normally in it afterward." Mike nodded, understanding completely. "The banks might not have seen the value in what you're doing," Earl continued, his voice growing stronger. "But we do. Every veteran, every family with a disabled parent or child, we see it plain as day." The construction company thrived from day one. Mike hired 2 other veterans as his first employees. Within 6 months, he had a staff of 8 and a waiting list of clients. His success sparked a wave of community-funded businesses throughout Riverdale, creating an alternative ecosystem for entrepreneurs who'd been overlooked by traditional funding sources. The local banks, facing competitive pressure from this new model and public scrutiny of their lending practices, began revising their loan approval processes. Richard Harrington was quietly reassigned to a less visible position. Sarah Matthews from First Capital eventually left banking altogether to start a non-profit focused on financial education for underserved communities. Meanwhile, Mike's business became known for more than quality construction. Each completed project, a wheelchair ramp, a modified kitchen, a roll-in shower, represented one more veteran or senior able to remain in their home, maintain their independence, and preserve their dignity. 1 year after that fateful bank rejection, Mike stood in the new, expanded headquarters of Callahan Accessible Construction. The original warehouse now adjoined a showroom where clients could explore accessibility options and test different modifications. The staff had grown to 15, including an occupational therapist who helped customize solutions for each client's specific needs. The wall behind Mike's desk displayed dozens of photographs, completed projects, and smiling clients. Among them hung a framed copy of Teresa's original article and a ceremonial check representing the community investment that had made everything possible. Mike had just finished interviewing a promising young carpenter, a recently discharged Army veteran with experience in cabinetry, when Diane Reynolds stopped by with a proposal. "The community investment model is working so well, we're thinking of formalizing it," she explained, spreading documents across his desk. "A proper Riverdale community investment fund to support veteran and minority entrepreneurs. We'd like you to be on the founding board, share your perspective, help review applications." Mike studied the proposal thoughtfully. "So we'd essentially become the bank that we wish had existed?" Diane smiled. "Exactly. But with values aligned with community needs, rather than just profit margins." Later that week, Mike received an unexpected visitor at his office. Richard Harrington stood awkwardly in the reception area, looking smaller somehow in a suit that no longer carried the same authority. "Mr. Callahan," he began, extending his hand. "I've been doing some reflection over the past year. I came to apologize and to learn. Our bank's approach was flawed. We missed an opportunity, but more importantly, we failed to serve our community properly." Mike considered the man carefully before accepting the handshake. "What exactly are you hoping to learn, Mr. Harrington?" "How to see value where we've been blind to it. How to better evaluate business potential beyond traditional metrics." Harrington paused. "I've taken a position with a regional development authority. We're revamping our approach to community investment. Your success has become something of a case study." The conversation that followed was candid but constructive. Mike neither absolved Harrington of responsibility nor denied him the opportunity to improve. By its end, they had sketched the outline of a new training program for loan officers, focused on recognizing non-traditional business strengths and understanding the unique perspectives veterans bring to entrepreneurship. As evening fell and Mike locked up the workshop, he paused to watch the sunset paint Riverdale's modest skyline in shades of amber and gold. The town hadn't changed physically. Same buildings, same streets, same people, yet everything was different. What had begun as one veteran's struggle against institutional barriers had catalyzed a profound shift in how the community viewed itself and its responsibilities to its members. The banks still stood on their corners, solid and imposing as ever, but their power had been tempered by the knowledge that the community could and would create alternatives when necessary. Mike's phone buzzed with a text from Earl Simmons. "Steps. Working perfect. Having the grandkids over this weekend. First time in 3 years they can visit without carrying me in. Thank you, son." These were the victories that mattered, not proving the banks wrong, but proving the community right in its belief that everyone deserves the chance to build something meaningful, and that sometimes the most valuable investments aren't recognized by those too focused on traditional metrics of success. In the end, it wasn't just about modified homes or even successful businesses. It was about a modified community, one that had learned to recognize the value of all its members and the strength that comes from investing in each other. That weekend, as Mike helped Earl prepare for his grandchildren's visit by making last-minute adjustments to the newly installed handrails, the elderly veteran summed it up perfectly. You know what those banks never understood? They thought this was about money, but it was always about belonging, about coming home and being able to stay there, on your own terms, with your dignity intact. That's something worth investing in. 1 year after facing rejection from every bank in town, Mike Callahan's business wasn't just surviving, it was redefining success. The community that had rallied around him hadn't just funded a business. They had reclaimed their power to determine what mattered, what deserved support, and how neighbors should treat one another. As for those banks that had turned him away, they were now competing for the opportunity to refinance his community, loans into traditional business accounts, offering terms that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Mike listened to their pitches politely but made no commitments. After all, he already had all the investment partners he needed, an entire community who believed in his vision and shared in his success. People who understood that the true measure of a community isn't in its buildings or businesses, but in how it supports those who have served and sacrificed for it. And that was the unexpected twist that no banker could have predicted. In denying one veteran a chance, they had inadvertently sparked a revolution in community investment that would change Riverdale forever. Have you ever witnessed a community come together to support someone when institutions failed them? Share your stories in the comments below. If you know a veteran entrepreneur who deserves recognition, tag them or share this video with them. And if you want to see more stories of communities creating their own solutions, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an update. Remember, sometimes the most powerful response to no is for a community to say yes together.